I love that song.
Yes.
It got me through seminary as I drove back and forth from Appleton to Minneapolis every week for 4 years. I was in my mid 40s, and the endeavor was an enormous change, a radical turn in my life. Although I felt such a strong pull towards chaplaincy, I was secretly a little bit afraid that I was crazy to do it. I was not and still am not a very religious person. I was more drawn to pastoral care. In seminary, I felt like a fraud at times. The song Losing My Religion popped up on the radio often during my commutes each week. It grounded me when I felt unsure. Now, I'm sure you're all thinking that this song meant a lot to me because I was reforming my religion by going to seminary, which would make complete sense. But I ask you today not to get stuck in that metaphor. Going to seminary did not change my religion. I was Unitarian Universalist when I started, and I was Unitarian Universalist when I ended. That's not why this song is central to my message today. To be honest, it's totally about, excuse me, about changing. Oh, there goes the voice. Let me get my water. To be totally honest, it was more about changing the way I thought about myself, about my gifts and talents, but also about accepting the more hidden parts of myself. It challenged me to see the gifts in the darker corners of my life, places I had never shown light on before. It made me see the unholy religion that I think a lot of us might hold. That insistent voice you hear around thoughts of what you can and cannot do, what you were supposed to be. I was born into a faith of a long-standing religion whose creed was that I was never enough. Were you raised in that faith too? Enforced through old and sacred texts that I had been taught as a child. Then as I aged, it was repeated in the echoes of our culture, in classrooms and offices, and then repeated all the time by the forceful evangelism of marketing that whispered of scarcity, comparisons, and want. Things like fear, doubt, or shame around old lessons or things taught by our culture can mold and contort us. It can influence how we are with ourselves and others. Today, using some of the words from the REM song, Losing My Religion, I hope to reflect on how choosing to be vulnerable can help us to form deeper connections with others and allow us to find a truer version of ourselves. I don't know if I can do it. Oh no, I've said too much. I haven't said enough. That's me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight, losing my religion. When I was a newly ordained minister, I was invited to our UU headquarters in Boston. It was a gathering of all the new folks who had been brought into ministry that year. During the seminar, the leaders had us reflect on things that got in the way of our ministry. It led to some deep sharing and confessions. In the tenderness of those confessions, we were then asked, what's your good news about your faith? What is it that you want everyone to know? Well, I didn't even have to stop and think. I knew exactly what my good news was. And it was something I shared with people almost every day in my work as a hospice chaplain. I raised my hand excitedly in my small group and I shared right away that I believe we are all called to shine just as we are. We are hurting, we are bruised, we are brilliant, we are beautiful, and we are unique. Because I believe we are all individual facets of the divine, that divine energy that flows through all of us and in all things. That belief held a deep and sturdy spot within my heart and mind, and it still does. I've said these words here to you before. But back then, on that day in Boston, as I shared my good news, I suddenly stopped because it hit me. I realized in that moment that I did not believe that good news for myself. My old religion, my old belief that I was not enough, held a very strong hold on me. I sat there dumbfounded. Oprah, if she had been there, she would have said this was an aha moment. It literally turned my world upside down for a while. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that perhaps that's why I felt so strongly about sharing this good news, because I so desperately needed to believe it for myself. Consider this. Consider this, the slip that brought me to my knees. That's me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight, losing my religion. So now what? I wondered. I like to watch TED Talks. TED Talks are a global set of forums owned by the Sapling Foundation, where they have experts in different fields share ideas they feel are important. In 2010, Dr. Brene Brown, one of my teachers whom I often turn to in my sermons, shared a talk about vulnerability. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't, but if you haven't, you should. She's a researcher who studies shame and vulnerability. Can you imagine? She is running towards the things that we are running away from. Her talk was transformative for me. While sharing personal stories that revealed her own fears and struggles, her honest and casual style made me feel like she was talking to me. And if over 19 million views are any indication, I think a lot of other people felt she was talking to them as well. She shared her own stories about shame that she carried and her own fears of vulnerability. And then she shared how her research showed that our feelings and stories of shame influence how we connect or disconnect with others in our lives. That's me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight, losing my connection. For most of us, human connection is what gives purpose and meaning in our lives. I would argue that for me, that's the holy part of loving. For me, that connection of love is how I experience the divine in my life. The Bible claims that God is love. And that simple verse rings more true for me than any other definitions of God that I have ever read. But shame from our past, shame for mistakes, shame taught at our parents' knees, digs down deep. And it can cause cracks and can create a disconnect between ourselves and others. So to stay safe, you hold back, you disconnect. You don't let others look behind that facade to see your real self. Through countless interviews and research, Brene Brown created a definition of shame as a sense of feeling unworthy of love and belonging. She says, shame's the thing that keeps us from trying something new. It's the gremlin at the door that says, no, you can't. You're not good enough. I know your story. I know how you grew up. Who do you think you are? That's me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight. Every whisper of every waking hour. Have you heard that gremlin? It can be loud and a loud and persistent beast. But in reality, if we can quiet that voice down and look around, we see it's really just us alone in that corner. The only real critic in the room is ourselves as we stand atop old messages that no longer serve us. What holds shame firmly in place is our own fear of being vulnerable. Feels too scary. And many of us rationalize that it's better to hide ourselves than to risk being rejected. How many of us were raised to believe that being vulnerable was a bad thing, an act of weakness? How many of us work hard to keep that side of ourselves a little bit hidden? I think many of us know that feeling. Our stomach feels queasy and unsteady. Our mouth goes dry. We're not sure what to do or say. It can feel dangerous and risky. Our culture tells us to be vulnerable in our workplace or school or in relationships is a sign of weakness and unworthiness. That's me in the corner, trying to keep up with you. And I don't know if I can do it. Yet Brene Brown says, wait a minute, step back and think about a time when you saw someone who allowed the spotlight of vulnerability to shine on them, and they took an emotional risk to share a difficult truth. Think about a time when someone very boldly showed you who they really were. We've all experienced moments like this. In the last month, we heard that Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman has admitted himself into care for his depression. That took courage. We've heard that actor Bruce Willis has frontal temporal dementia and will be stepping away from his acting career. Both admissions will clearly change how people see them. But the real truth is that it took complete courage to admit to these challenges so publicly. It made me think of how we lost the great comedian Robin Williams to suicide when he was confused and fearful of his own future with Lewy body dementia. I miss his light in our world. And I wonder what might have happened if he had shared his fear. I think of Michael J. Fox, who's turned his struggle with Parkinson's into an opportunity for education, funding, and research. I confess it feels difficult to watch him speak sometimes when he lets us see what his Parkinson's really looks like when he can't control his movements. But he does it to be true to who he is. And he shows us that he is much more than his disease. I think of Simone Biles, who pulled herself out of competing in the Olympics because she knew deep down in her soul that she was hurting herself physically and mentally. Women and athletes around the world supported her and praised her as they all understood the dangers of pushing yourself too far. I think of Joni Mitchell, who sang in this past summer's Newport Jazz Festival, still showing the physical changes to her voice and body from a brain aneurysm that she had 5 years ago. And yet we were thrilled by her voice and her presence. We were spellbound by her strength and her music made more beautiful by how honestly she shared herself with us. And the truth is, for all these people, in those moments of raw honesty, when they pulled back the deceptive curtain of Hollywood or fame, we saw them. We really saw them in their corner, bruised, unsteady, but still beautiful. We didn't see it as weakness at all, but absolute courage. And we're surrounded by people in our own lives who do brave and vulnerable things every single day. I facilitated a group of family members who cared for their loved ones who have dementia. The honesty in which they shared their frustrations and exhaustion was so brave and courageous. It was a safe place where they could say out loud, I just wish my mother could die to end her suffering. And others understood completely and compassionately held their hands. I think of friends who took care of loved ones without any break during COVID, or parents who felt lost in the darkness of homeschooling their kids during that time with no relief. I think of other friends crippled by the loss of a partner, and they need just to be held in their pain. I think of those of us who can only shovel the walks and bring meals to people who are sick or hurting. Sometimes it feels like that's all we can do. And in all of these stories, there is such an underlying sweetness. a window into the complexities of being human, and then also a sacred honor to be invited in to witness their vulnerability. We've had it all wrong. Being vulnerable is not weak at all, but pure courage and strength. So many of us were baptized in the faith tradition that told us to hide our weaknesses, to pretend to be something we were not, to keep the real parts of ourselves hidden. But if we're honest, the truth is that doing so only disconnects us and puts us in a corner. We become sewn up in our own skin with our handmade threads of shame. For me, and maybe for you, it's time to lose that old and tattered religion. Now, I truly believe there's a caveat here. I don't think you should be running all over town telling everybody your business, sharing your struggles with strangers on the bus, or confessing all to the dentist or the dry cleaner. Do not become that person. But we all have a circle of loving around us, the folks who've earned the right to hear our fears and our confessions. Maybe it's a dear friend, a close neighbor, a partner or a beloved family member, maybe a therapist, maybe it's friends here at this fellowship. Maybe it's someone who you have also earned the right to hear their truths. We know who we can trust. And here's the thing, even in our trusted circle of beloveds, they need to see us at our worst, to see us struggle, to see us in need, so they too can feel comfortable to show us those things as well. I struggle with anxiety. It's usually pretty manageable, but sometimes it literally shouts my name and tackles me to the ground. I seek help during those times, but I used to hide it. I was ashamed. When my anxiety acted up, my pattern was just to reinforce my facade, to get some more boards and some more nails, and maybe even put up a fresh coat of paint. But then even that wasn't working. I decided I needed to tell people that this was a part of me, that anxiety was a river that ran through my life. I'm doing well. But the amazing thing in my telling people who had heard the right to hear my story, is I had so many other people come forward to tell me of their mental health issues too. A beloved friend confessed that she had been afraid to go back to get her depression medications recalibrated. She had to find a new therapist because hers had retired, and that just seemed insurmountable to her. She felt stuck and ashamed. We talked openly as she and I addressed our struggles. And best of all, our shame evaporated like an unwanted ghost. Brene Brown says vulnerability is the antidote to shame. Shining light into our darkness with others we trust is actually a tool of connection. I know if you pay any attention to the messages I share when I've come to speak here, that I've said many of these words before. This month's theme of vulnerability made it easy to return to a repeated but essential message. But while writing these ideas into new words, I knew I still needed to say them. I knew many of you still needed to hear them. I truly believe we need to hear this message about the courage it takes to be vulnerable on a regular basis, because the Greek chorus of our society constantly sings to us that we are not enough. But the truth is, you are enough. I know, just even saying that feels a bit cliche in our comfortable American lives. We see it in daily affirmations or on greeting cards. Our yoga teacher smiles and tells us that in class. But many of us, myself included, battle with accepting that as a core truth. Its simplicity can be hard to believe. But I swear to you, you are enough. just as you are right here, right now, with yesterday's soup stain on your jeans, with your hair sticking up funny in the back, at the weight you are right now, with wrinkles that crease around your mouth and eyes as you smile, with the exact amount of money you have in your bank account right now. You are beautiful, bruised, hurting, unique, and divine. And there it is, the core of my good news. I thought that I heard you laughing. I thought that I heard you sing. I thought I saw you try. That's me in the corner, losing my religion. Let's lose this religion that vulnerability is a too transparent coat to wear in front of others, a coat that scratches at our neck and buttons up too tightly. Let's open our hearts and share our struggles with those who have earned the right to hold our stories. And then let's make new coats of comfort for and with one another. Coats with soft, stretchy fabrics and down filling, with satin lapels that caress us as we walk with one another in this vulnerable journey of life. Let us choose to see the strength in being vulnerable with our circle of caring, and let go of the shackles of shame that keep us hidden from one another. Let's accept that, yes, we are brilliant, shining facets of the divine, just as we are. Yes, that's me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight, choosing my religion. May it be so, and amen.